Okay, so Cody Bellinger, bat number 2 on the market. Are the Mariners interested?
Let me ask you this question. Would you be interested in a 12-year, $264 million contract?
Absolutely not. Would you?
That's a little bit much. It's the difference in contract projections from Spotrac to MLB trade rumors is pretty massive. So Spotrac it's more of just a straight structure of his contract comparing similar free agents at his position and similar age. And they came out to 5 for 112 at a 22.5 AAV, which is about what he's worth. But then MLB Trade Rumors jumps out here and predicts that he's going to get $265 million over 12 years. I feel like somebody might offer him 12 years. 12 years seems a little ridiculous for Cody Bellinger given his last 2 seasons. But in this thin class and knowing what Cody has been in the past, it's entirely possible he gets $12 million or 12 years. And some teams might be thinking that's a bargain because I'm sure there might be some teams out there who look at Cody Bellinger and think MVP Cody Bellinger is still in there somewhere.
5 for 112 sounds more intriguing. If that was actually around the ballpark of what his offers were going to be, I would say, okay, maybe the Mariners should be tuned in on this. 12 years, not only do I think that is a little irresponsible for a guy who is 2 seasons removed from a 47 WRC plus for the year, that along with that, the Mariners would never shell out a 12-year contract for somebody in free agency, unless it was Shohei. They would not shell out a 12-year contract for Cody Bellinger, which is why not only do I think that would be a bad idea, but I don't think the Mariners would even entertain it.
Do you think Cody and Mr. Scotty Boras would... So if they're looking at this market and they see that they can't get a 12-year contract, so a 12-year contract to put Cody Bellinger at age 40, and he could retire on that. He wouldn't need to worry about hitting the market again. But if he does 5 for 112, that spits him out into free agency again in his age 33 season, which if he goes out there and has a great 5-year stretch over the prime of his career, that sets him up for a final 8 to 10-year contract at a significantly inflated rate to what he would get right now in the future free agent market. I don't think that's the worst idea in the world, either for the teams that want to sign him currently, because there would be more options with a 5-year contract. And it wouldn't be terrible for Cody either, knowing that if he plays well for 5 years, he's going to get significantly more money. He could get that $264 million. I mean, he'd probably get more than $264 million in 5 years from now over a shorter length of contract.
Does he want to take that gamble, though? I feel like he has no interest in trying to test the market again at 33 years old, because how many guys really thrive at 33 years old? Some, the hit rate for it is not that high. So if you're Cody, you come off a good year in Chicago, plus Scott Boras is your agent, I bet you they're looking at, let's get at least an 8-year deal, if not more. That's what I would guess, which is why Scott Boras and the Mariners almost never pair up. Jerry Dipoto doesn't like to shell out huge contracts. Scott Boras wants nothing more than huge contracts for his players. So I feel like that's more the side they're leaning to right now, being Cody and Boras, which is, look, when Shohei's gone, it's all about me. We can get a lot of money from somebody if they'll pay it up.
Let's discuss the player himself. You've been more against Cody than I have. Explain why.
It's just that in 2 years, this guy went from being an MVP and putting up a 161 WRC plus to 47 in 2021. 47. So he didn't qualify among the league ranks that year. I don't think he had enough at bats or games played. Had he, though, he would have been the single worst hitter in all of baseball that year with that WRC plus mark. Worst hitter in baseball. That was 2 years ago. And by the way, his 2022 campaign, it's not like it was some all-star year, because his WRC plus that year jumped up from 47 to then 87. Or it was in the 80s range, which, great. Like, that's well below league average. That is not appealing. If he had one bad year, like say Cody had a year in 2021 where that WRC plus mark was in the 80 to 90 range, maybe hit 19, 20 homers, still played some decent defense, but then bounced back the last 2 years, I'd say, okay, for the most part, the track record's there. When I look at 2 bad years in a row like that is terrifying. That feels like the exact type of guy, also knowing with the Mariners' luck, that they would sign him and that contract would just flop. So that's my hesitancy with Cody. I think his powers significantly regressed over the last couple of years. I think he's been very inconsistent at the plate, and I think he's going to demand a lot. So if the Mariners are going to have to wisely use their money, I don't know if Cody Bellinger is the best fit to go spend it.
So your entire basis, it sounds like, for not wanting to sign him is not the last year he had, but the 2 before that.
Yeah, what he did in Chicago this past year was really good. 26 bombs, had a great second half. We know he plays good center field defense. He can play the corners too. If you're really buying in on that 2023 season being a turn of the guard for Cody Bellinger and starting to find himself again, then sure, then I'd be open to it. I cannot look past what happened in 21 and 22. That, like, it's not just he was up and down. No, he was bad and really bad. Again, 2021, you're talking about maybe the worst hitter in baseball. So if a guy that was 2 years removed from that all of a sudden is getting $200 million from you, I'd be squirming in my seat a little bit. I would be very, very nervous to see how that contract plays out in Seattle.
Can I sell you on something?
Okay.
What if I told you Cody Bellinger in 2023 was a completely different hitter than he was with the Dodgers? I mean, completely different. And I'm talking good Cody and bad Cody. I'm talking about both of them. I'm talking about he is a different hitter than when he won MVP, striking out only 16% of the time, walking nearly 15% of the time, being among the best hitters in baseball in 2019 and taking home the National League MVP. And like alongside his 47 WRC plus season, he is a different hitter than both those seasons, because in both those seasons, he tried to be what he was in 2019. In 2019, it was a success. 2021, it wasn't. He had some mechanical things. He changes his swing almost every single year. But what we saw in 2023 was a completely different version of Cody Bellinger. He struck out significantly less. He didn't walk nearly as much. His walk rate was only around 7% this year, which is below league average. He just essentially went to the plate and started swinging a whole bunch. And he made an effort not only to just swing a lot, but he was also going to cut down on his swing and miss against breaking pitches, which he did a magnificent job this season. I mean, he cut down his swing and miss against off-seed in half. It was 31.4% the year prior in 2022. And then breaking balls in general, he dropped that by 10%, 34% to 24%. Those are noticeable things. Those are things Cody definitely struggled with when he was in his final 2 years with the Dodgers. And he came to Chicago and he made a noticeable effort to sort of change what he became as a hitter. He's honestly what the Mariners want more in this offseason. Besides the fact he's not right-handed, he makes a ton of contact while swinging a lot, super athletic, plays good defense in the outfield, and is a menace on the base paths. Like, that sounds like the guy Jerry wants to go after this offseason. Like, that is it. And that's what Cody Bellinger was in 2023, in sort of a resurgence as a different baseball player than he was with the Dodgers.
I will say it is interesting that in those 2021 and 22 seasons, even when he was struggling mightily, he didn't have some sky-high strikeout rate. It was about 27% both years, which is not great. It's not terrible. It's very manageable, a 26 to 27% K rate. It was not in the 30s the way Teoscar and Gino have had theirs in certainly past years. Does the fact that Cody chases a decent amount scare you off at all? So yes, he does not actually strike out, but there is a little bit of chase in his game, and it's been that way his whole career, including this past year.
It is, I would say, a little bit concerning, but that I would say that's just kind of the profile of how it is, because if you're going to swing a lot, you're probably going to chase a lot. But even with him swinging a lot, he wasn't swinging and missing a whole bunch. There could be some regression there, 100%. But we also need to remember he wasn't playing in the most hitter-friendly park in the world in Wrigley Field. So, you know, he did probably go through a little bit of that, give or take at some points of the season. If there's something you were to be actually concerned about, you might think his power numbers are a little bit more inflated. He had the 6th highest difference between his actual slugging and his expected slugging. His actual slugging was 525 this year. His expected slugging was around 430. Now, he makes up for that in a couple of ways, and Mike Petriello wrote an article all the way back in May about this. But a lot of the points he made in that article still stand true for Cody's entire season. He got some bounces here and there that helped him out because his quality of contact also wasn't great, which is why his expected slugging was a little bit lower. But, his speed bails him out of a lot of things. Like, you can have crummy contact, but if you're as fast as Cody Bellinger is, a single turns into a double very quickly, or a double turns into a triple very quickly if you have the wheels to do so. So when he's grabbing those extra bases, it inflates the number a little bit, even though if the quality of contact doesn't reflect it as much. I would say if there's actually concern, I would say it'd be his quality of contact numbers instead of his chase numbers, because if you chase but you're still hitting the ball really hard, you can be like Teoscar Hernandez was this year on the road, where you're still striking out a bunch, but in a better hitting environment, you're still crushing the baseball. Cody's quality of contact is not what it's not what Teoscar Hernandez is. It's middle of the pack to below average, actually.
So that was the next thing I was going to bring up was, does the quality of contact scare you at all? Because outside of 2019, when he just had his ridiculous MVP campaign, he's never been a guy that's just barreled the hell out of baseballs. It's just not his game. It doesn't mean he's not a good player. It doesn't mean he doesn't put up great production. He's just not a huge barrel rate guy. He doesn't get a ton of barrels per year. But you know what? If Teoscar couldn't do that in T-Mobile Park, if Teoscar could not put the season together in Seattle that we all thought he was going to put together, despite his hard hit profile saying, oh, he'll be fine no matter where he goes, then maybe you just say, screw it. For the Mariners, it doesn't matter what the hard hit profile is or what Jesse Winker was compared to what Teoscar was compared to what Cody Bellinger is. Like, maybe there's no rhyme or reason for T-Mobile Park. Maybe that's just how tough a place it is to hit. Where with Cody, you just buy the fact that maybe he changed some things. Maybe he is a new hitter and maybe he can thrive here because he is more of a bat to ball guy now and a contact guy now. But yeah, you just won't hit the ball all that hard.
And unlike those two guys, he's a complete player. I mean, Baseball Savant had him 81st percentile and higher in all three of batting, fielding, and base running run value. Yeah. You can't say that for those three.
For the other two. You mean
the other two, sorry. You can't say that for the other two.
No, you can't. And that's what makes Cody Bellinger's floor at least somewhat safe. Even when he is in a massive slump, even when he can't hit the broadside of a barn, he will play defense. He has always played defense, and he's pretty fast. So usually he's a center fielder. Now, obviously, if he was here in Seattle, he would not be playing center field. But he can play the corners. He could play right field. And if that's the case, you could put Bellinger in right. You could have Julio in center. You could have Kelenic in left. And I think Cody Bellinger would play a perfectly good right field, if not a really good right field. So, look, I still have my concerns. I do like the fact that he turned things around in 2023, but maybe I'm using less logic here with my reasoning and too much emotion. But we've just seen so many contracts and trades flail out for the Mariners over the years that just seeing what Cody did over those last couple of years scares me in the sense of just the Mariners' luck, right? To, give him a big contract and then it flops. Now, maybe logically he is a changed guy at the plate, but just the emotional side of this, what my brain's saying to me is what are the odds it happens again with the Mariners?
And you made a good point before. You would have less of a problem with this if the Mariners' budget was bigger. But we know the Mariners' budget is not infinite. In fact, it is far from infinite. If this was Steve Cohen making this decision, you'd say, oh, okay, I mean, that's not a big deal. We know the budget can have $150 million more on it if that's what it requires. But that's not the case with Cody Bellinger. If they sign Cody Bellinger to a 12-year contract, that's like it for the offseason, for the most part.
That's it. That'd be their one big move. Maybe they'd make a lateral trade or two, but they're not making any more big impact moves like that. So that would be it. Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit pre-recording where I said if this was Steve Cohen, he'd sign anybody. If it didn't work out in a few years, like if Cody was that bad and went back to 2021 Cody Bellinger, if this was Steve Cohen as the owner, he'd probably say, all right, we'll release him. I'll eat the money. We'll go sign somebody else. We know John Stanton's not doing that. And we know Jerry Dipoto hates constructing a roster like that. So again, if this was a 5 to 6 year deal for Cody Bellinger, I would be very, very much listening with wide open ears saying, all right, let's talk about this. Let's really think about this. Could he come here and change this offense? If it's going to cost 10 to 12 years and a fat contract, I'm a little more skeptical.
He just it just seems like too. Like, first of all, we've seen no links to Seattle at all. There has been no reporting that Cody Bellinger is interested in signing in Seattle. I don't know. I don't actually think that the Mariners are interested in signing Cody Bellinger, which, maybe if they were in a bigger market and they had more cash at hand, they would at least check in on him, and they might get mentioned in a couple of these reports as places Cody Bellinger could be interested in. But the only two places I'm seeing really is the Cubs and the Yankees. I mean, the Cubs really liked him. He really liked playing in Chicago. I mean, he had a career resurgence in Chicago. His time in Chicago is the reason that he's about to become generationally wealthy in this free agent market. And the Yankees, as we know, desperately need outfielders besides Aaron Judge. And Cody Bellinger seems like a pretty good fit for that.
The Giants seem to be in on him too. So if you want a third team in the mix, San Francisco. And they certainly have money to spend, as we've seen from their failed attempts to sign some free agents in the last couple of off seasons. But yeah, it does feel like it'd be the Yankees or the Cubs. And if I had to place a bet anywhere, I feel like he'd probably go back to Chicago, despite Scott Boris's ridiculous quotes, which we talked about on Friday's show at length. But yeah, it just seemed like a fit there. It just seemed like he was really comfortable there. He seemed like he liked the team. He liked the fan base. He liked the area, and he thrived. So if he went back to the Cubs, I certainly would not be shocked. And that's the bigger part of this, right? Is Cody and Scott Boras have to be willing to listen to potentially playing in Seattle. I will say, I'm going to give you a round of applause here because you actually did a decent job sales pitching me on the Cody Bellinger idea, in the sense of he's a new hitter. He has changed some things. He's not quite the guy he was when he was struggling mightily in 21 and 22. But it still circles back to the idea of, would the Mariners even entertain this? And would Scott Boras and Cody Bellinger entertain this? And I don't know if either of those things are going to happen.
I don't know if Scott's flying Cody up to Seattle. I don't think so. If Simeon wasn't coming to Seattle, which was a fit, as we said, it was a fit. I don't know if Cody's. I don't know even if the Mariners were interested, Cody Bellinger would be taking a meeting with the Seattle Mariners. So that would be an interesting fit. It's going to be fun to see where Cody ends up, though, because Cody, when he's playing well, is such a fun baseball player. And he made the Cubs significantly better this year, and he was very, very good on the Dodgers. We saw the upside that he has, although to his own fault, a little bit too much tinkering. It's like you tinker with your fantasy football lineup before you roll out on a Sunday. Well, it seemed like that's what Cody Bellinger was doing every year with his swing, and it did not work out very well for him, and that's why he's ended up in this situation. You could only imagine if he just kept going off that 2019 season. I mean, he'd be probably pushing $400 million.
Oh, yeah.
265 is, enough.
Just maybe not for the Mariners. Again, I think you did a good job convincing me, and hopefully some listeners too, of, maybe Cody really has changed some things. And again, if this was the Mariners, if this was a 5 or 6 year contract on the table, to begin with, if it was a 5 or 6 year deal, I'd kind of be all ears, but you would have sales pitched me even more. Maybe even if you stretch it to 7. But when you get into those double digit years, it just gets a little frightening for most guys. Honestly, most guys not named Shohei or somebody like that, it gets a little frightening. But somebody will give it to him, that's for sure.
Would you have, okay, so let's just play a slight game here now that we've seen 2 years of the contract. If you were to go back to 2021, and let's throw out all the extracurriculars of what had happened with the Mariners that season with a certain franchise icon. If you had the option to sign Corey Seager to a 12-year contract, would you do
it? So with no knowledge of what he's done since then, right?
No, I would say you know what he's done now, but I'm saying the situation with Kyle Seager, probably let's say it doesn't exist because that obviously had a factor.
Oh, yeah, I would give Corey Seager a 12-year contract now, 100% after seeing what he's done in his first 2 years in Texas. Again, that's knowing what we know now. Back then, I probably would have said no way. Now, oh yeah, I'd give it to him. I think it's also fair to say Corey Seager is probably a better player than Cody Bellinger is, despite Cody having an MVP to his name. I think Corey's worth a lot more.
Yeah, well, if it wasn't for some two-way guy named Shohei, I think Corey would have an MVP to his name. So that would be it. But it'll be interesting. And again, sometimes these long contracts work. Sometimes they actually do. Sometimes they don't. And that's why you run the risk of seeing if it's going to work out.